I tried to fire off more rounds, but gunfire drove me back to cover before I could get off a single shot. I breathed hard, wiping some blood from my cheek. Some of the exploding rubble had hit hard enough to cut me. "You know," I said, "I think I fell for you that first day." Stupid, huh? Love at first sight. What a cliché. I got off 3 shots, but the soldiers were acting less scared now. They had figured out there was only one of me, and that my gun was only a handgun. I was probably only alive because I'd blown the cycle, which made them worry about explosives. "I don't even know if I can call it love," I whispered, reloading. "Am I in love? Is it just infatuation? We've known each other for less than a month, and you've treated me like dirt about half that time. But that day fighting fortuity, and that day in the power plant, it seemed like we had something. I don't know. Something together. Something I wanted." I glanced at her pale, motionless figure. "I think," I said, "that a month ago I would have left you by the cycle, because I wanted so badly to get my vengeance on him." Bam, bam, bam! The pile of bricks shook, as if the officers were trying to cut through them to get to me. "That scares me about myself," I said softly, not looking at Megan. "For what it's worth, thank you for making me care about something other than Steelheart. I don't know if I love you, but whatever the emotion is, it's the strongest one I've felt in years. Thank you." I fired widely, but fell back as a bullet grazed my arm. The magazine was empty. I sighed, dropping Megan's gun and raising my father's. Then I pointed it at her. My finger hesitated on the trigger. It would be a mercy. Better a quick death than to suffer torture and execution. I tried to force myself to pull the trigger. Sparks, she looks beautiful, I thought. Her unbloodied side was toward me, her golden hair fanning out, her skin pale and eyes closed as if asleep. Could I really do this? The gunshots had paused. I risked glancing over my crumbling pile of bricks. 2 enormous forms were mechanically clomping down the hallway. So they had brought in armor units. A piece of me felt proud that I was such a problem for them. The chaos the Reckoners had caused this day, the destruction we'd brought to Steelheart's minions, had driven them to overkill. A squad of 20 men and 2 mechanized armors had been sent to take down one guy with a pistol. "Time to die," I whispered. "I think I'll do it while firing a handgun at a 50-foot-tall suit of powered armor. At least it will be dramatic." I took a deep breath, nearly surrounded by enforcement forms creeping forward in the dark corridor. I began to stand, my gun leveled at Megan more firmly this time. I'd shoot her, then force the soldiers to gun me down. I noticed that my mobile was blinking. "Fire!" a soldier yelled. The ceiling melted. I saw it distinctly. I was looking down the tunnel, not wanting to watch Megan as I shot her. I had a clear view of a circle in the ceiling, becoming a column of black dust, cascading in a shower of disintegrated steel. Like sand from an enormous spigot, the particles hit the floor and billowed outward in a cloud. "Fire!" a soldier yelled. The ceiling melted. I saw it distinctly. I was looking down the tunnel, not wanting to watch Megan as I shot her. I had a clear view of a circle in the ceiling, becoming a column of black dust, cascading in a shower of disintegrated steel. Like sand from an enormous spigot, the particles hit the floor and billowed outward in a cloud. The haze cleared. My finger twitched, but I had not pulled the trigger. A figure stood from a crouch amid the dust. He had fallen from above. He wore a black coat, thin, like a lab coat, dark trousers, black boots, and a small pair of goggles over his eyes. Prof had come, and he wore a tensor on each hand, the green light glowing with a phantom cast. The officers opened fire, releasing a storm of bullets down the hallway. Prof raised his hand and thrust forward the glowing tensor. I could almost feel the device hum. Bullets burst in midair, crumbling. They hit Prof as little shavings of fluttering steel, no more dangerous than pinches of dirt. Hundreds of them pelted him and the ground around him. The ones that missed flew apart in the air, catching the light. Suddenly I understood why he wore the goggles. I stood up, slack-jawed, gun forgotten in my fingers. I'd assumed I was getting good with my tensor, but destroying those bullets? That was beyond anything I'd been able to comprehend. Prof didn't give the baffled soldiers time to recover. He carried no weapon that I could see, but he leapt free of the dust and dashed right toward them. The mechanized units started firing, but they used their rotary guns, as if they couldn't believe what they'd seen and figured a higher caliber was somehow the answer. More bullets popped in the air, shattered by Prof's tensors. His feet skidded across the ground on the dust, and then he reached the enforcement troops. He attacked fully armored men with his fists. My eyes widened as I saw him drop a soldier with a fist to the face, the man's helmet melting to powder before his attack. He's vaporizing the armor as he attacks. Prof spun between two soldiers, moving gracefully, slamming a fist into the gut of one, then spinning and slamming an arm into the leg of the other. Dust sprayed out as their armor failed them, disintegrating just before Prof hit. As he came up from the spin, he pounded a hand against the side of the steel chamber. The pulverized metal poured away, and something long and thin fell from the wall into his hand. A sword, carved from the steel by an incredibly precise tensor blast. Steel flashed as Prof struck at the disordered officers. Some tried to keep firing, and others were going in with batons, which Prof destroyed just as easily as he had the bullets. He wielded the sword in one hand, and his other hand set out near-invisible blasts that reduced metal and Kevlar to nothing. Dust streamed off soldiers who got too close to him, making them slip and stumble, suddenly unbalanced as helmets melted around their heads, and body armor fell away. Blood flew in front of high-powered flashlights, and men collapsed. It had been mere heartbeats since Prof had dropped into the room, but a good dozen of the soldiers were down. The armored units had drawn their shoulder-mounted energy cannons, but Prof had gotten too close. He hit a patch of steel dust at a sprint, then slid in a crouch forward, moving on the dust with obvious familiarity. He twisted to the side and swung his forearm, smashing through the armored unit's leg. Powder sprayed out the back as Prof's arm passed completely through it. He slid to a stop, still on one knee. The armor collapsed with a resounding thud as Prof leapt forward and drilled his fist through the second armor's leg. He pulled his hand out and the leg bent, then snapped, the unit collapsing sideways. It fired a yellow-blue blast into the ground as it fell, melting a portion of the floor. One foolhardy member of enforcement tried to charge Prof, who stood over the fallen armors. Prof didn't bother with the sword. He dodged to the side, then slammed his fist forward. I could see the fist approach the soldier's face, could see the helmet's visor vaporizing just in front of Prof's punch. The soldier dropped. The hallway grew silent. Sparkling steel flakes floated in beams of light like snow at midnight. I, Prof said in a powerful, self-assured voice, am known as Limelight. Let your master know that I am more than aggravated by being forced to bother myself with you worms. Unfortunately, my minions are fools and are incapable of following the simplest of orders. Tell your master that the time for dancing and playing is through. If he does not come to face me himself, I will dismantle this city piece by piece until I find him. Prof strode past the remaining soldiers without sparing them a glance. He walked toward me, his back to the soldiers. I grew tense, waiting for them to try something, but they didn't. They cowered. Men did not fight epics. They had been taught this, had had it drilled into them. Prof reached me, face shrouded in shadows, light shining from behind. That was genius, I said softly. Get the girl. I can't believe that you... Prof looked at me, and I finally caught sight of his features. Jaw clenched, eyes seeming to blaze with intensity. There was contempt in those eyes, and the sight of it caused me to stumble back in shock. Prof seemed to be shaking. his hands forming fists as if he were holding back something terrible. "Get the girl." I nodded dumbly, stuffing my gun back in my pocket and picking up Megan. "John?" Tia's voice came from his mobile. Mine was still on silent. "John, the soldiers have pulled out from my position. What's going on?" Prof didn't reply. He waved a tensered hand and the ground before us melted away. The dust drained like sand in an hourglass, revealing an improvised tunnel to the lower levels below. I followed him through the tunnel, and we made our escape.